page 1. Page 2. And page 2 would indicate that we were having issues, I don't want to say issues, but concerns in relation to the trying to get our interpretation of our standing orders harmonized. And based on discussions in the last meeting, Ms. Jimenez is tasked to do certain things, which when we concluded she had, not for this week, but going forward, and she has indicated that she's somewhere along the way, and we will get to that in due time. Page 3, which dealt primarily with the Standing Order 74-8 and Standing Order 66. And we're looking at how to get those two in harmony with each other and what we anticipate to arrive out of it with respect to the convening of sessional select committees, etc. And Senator Scott Motley, you are here at the right time, because when we closed on the last occasion, you were indicating that you wanted to have a look in more detail in relation to 74-8. Now, you will have more time to look, Senator Scott Motley, based on discussions that I have had with Ms. Jimenez in respect to what was previously discussed at other meetings, and having regard to all the conversations, a proposal will come. It won't come today, it will come to us, and we can look at it in our subsequent meeting. So page 4. Page 5. Can I get someone? There is nothing to amend. Can I get someone to move for the acceptance of the minutes? Senator Cavan Gill and Senator Scott Motley, seconding. All right, thank you. Matters arising from the minutes, as I said, whilst we were going through, in relation to getting the harmonization of the wording in the standing orders. Ms. Jimenez is undertaking that task, and in relation to Standing Order 74-8 and how it relates to 66, Ms. Jimenez is also undertaking a task in that regard in capturing the discussions that we have had. And interestingly, we look at just 74-8, I would have thought that it was so simple, but with the discussions that we have had, it does indicate that it takes a lot of thought and rewording, and to make it easier, more easily understood from a drafting perspective. And there are some clauses that we have gone through already in the standing orders that with the new drafting techniques compared to how drafters used to deal with matters before, where you'd have these long paragraphs and you try to understand and appreciate what is contained in it. The new drafting techniques have a different style, which makes it much easier for reading. So the persons who would have gone through law school and look at some of the older legislation will understand exactly what it is that I'm speaking about. Yeah. I mean, other countries in the Caribbean have done that, you know. You look in Barbados, that they have gone through theirs, and I think someone made a comment, I can't recall where it was, that a lot of our legislation you find in pieces all over the place, and we need to, yes.
You can't know exactly what it says because the amendments are not.
You want to turn on mic?
I was saying that sometimes you don't know whether section there have been amendments or any aspect of it has been repealed because of how it is.
Yes.
Even with our Constitution, the amendments are not contained in say for example, local government. Somebody who is unfamiliar with the constitutional provisions which have been made won't be able to take up the Constitution and see the changes that have been made. And for me, that is unacceptable.
Yeah. So we have to look on how we approach these things, because the laws are not just there for persons who are in Parliament. They're there for the people, and they must be able to understand and appreciate what is contained within their legislation. Because it goes right back to this. What is your right and what is your responsibility? All right, so in respect to some proposed amendments, capturing the discussions that we have had, Ms. Jimenez has undertaken that at the next meeting of the Standing Orders Committee, we will have that before us. But it will be circulated, the proposals, before, so you can have a look at it. And if it is acceptable to you, when we come back to the meeting, we can discuss it and eventually sign off on 74-8/66. All right? So we'll just move on to 75, Ms. Beckford. Witnesses. All right, so in respect to witnesses, when it is intended to examine any witnesses, the member requiring such witnesses shall deliver to the clerk of the committee the name, residence, and occupation of any witness he desires to examine. 2, I don't think there's any issue. Yes? Yes, Senator Fraser-Baines?
Yes, Chairman. I want to put for consideration that instead of residence, that could be residence, place of employment, because depending on the nature of the matter that is being discussed, the person that we're seeking to come before the committee may be coming by virtue of his or her employee. And so I think it would be appropriate to put his or her, employment rather than residence.
So you're proposing,
The name,
let me hear the proposal.
when it is intended to examine any witnesses, the member requiring such witnesses shall deliver to the clerk of the committee the name, residence, and or place of employment and occupation of any witness he desires to examine.
Okay, that is a proposal from Senator Fraser-Baines. Any other comment from any member?
Chairman, I agree. I don't particularly like the use of the term residence as part of these activities, bearing in mind that, we know people would want to feel secured, and there would be a sense of a risk of exposure if you're asking an individual to come to the Parliament to be a witness in any matter, and they would be required to put their place of residence.
No, it's not the witness, It says that the member who is requiring the attendance of the witness, so that he is identifying to the clerk who this person is. So the reference to residence is that the member would be advising the clerk that they would wish for this particular person to attend.
Yes.
The name of the person
Yes.
is given, the residence of the person, but you may not, what I understand from Senator Fraser-Binns is that, one, you may not know, or it may be, the person may be more easily found at their place of employment, or you may only know the place of employment. Probably the person is an employee, a civil servant, and that is what we know. And what is relevant really is matters that come from that place of employment, right? But it gives an option, because if you don't know it, you wouldn't be able to give the residence. So she's proposing that what is the and or would cover the situation where you do not know.
So you can just
necessarily
ask the person to utilize whichever.
Whichever. And that's why the and or would be there.
The capacity of work, right.
So, and what I'm informed that it is a practice that has taken place from this parliament, in particular in relation to the PAC, to send it to the information that is given as to the individual that is required does not necessarily have to state residence, but uses under the place of employment. Yes. It's a practice. Yes.
Is expected in this.
And so,
what we are seeking to do is to entrench the practice now.
That is correct. Right? So everybody seems to be in favor of that. So after residence and or place of employment. Correct? That's your proposal, Senator Fraser-Binns. And it seems that you have full support in that regard. So two. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Is it possible to also contemplate the modality of attendance for witnesses?
Well,
not
yeah,
just
I don't, the manner of, you mean summoning the person?
Yeah.
I do, well, that, that wouldn't fall in one. So let us see if two, because in two now I see where it speaks about the desire to summon any witness. So if it is not there when we go through, we can look on whether that is in, but it is said, when it is intended to examine, the member requiring such witness shall deliver to the clerk of the committee the name. So you're saying that in respect to the member, providing that you want to look on the manner in which they...
In looking at how we summon witnesses and looking at the Canadian standing orders too, they have provision for persons who are incarcerated. I don't know if we would want to take it that far.
Well, let us just go
summon
through
those kind of persons too.
Well, let us go through in the first instance and see whether there is something lacking in respect to how they should be summoned. But we have, one is dealing with how the member communicates the desire. And that is where the process starts. So if the committee desires to summon any witness, the chairman shall supply the name, residence, and occupation of every such witness to the clerk of parliament at least 7 days before his evidence is required. The clerk shall then, subject to the directions of the president, summon every such witness on behalf of the Senate. So that is where I believe now they start looking at the issue of summoning the witness. This seems to refer to the committee and not just a member, which puts a different spin from what is on one. So where the committee desires to summon any witnesses, the chairman shall supply the name, residence, and/or employment. Would then have to, it would follow automatically, Madam Fraser Binns? So that would be an occupation of every such witness to the clerk of the parliament at least 7 days before its evidence is required. Okay. But let me find, you see something that is disconnected there between 1 and 2? Huh?
No, Chairman, I just wondering whether 7 days is actually a reasonable time. Because the 7 days is when the chairman of the committee is required to provide that information to the clerk of the parliament, who then has to issue the summon to the witness.
At least 7 days, not less than 7 days.
Right. So what I'm saying, Chairman, is I don't know if 7 days is an appropriate time, because you want to give people sufficient time to prepare themselves to appear before the committee. So I was thinking that it should be at least 14 days before its evidence is required. Or 10 working days, you know, if you want to, but I don't know if 7 days is a reasonable time. Of course, Ms. Beckford could share with us the experience of the court, the experience of the parliament when they have summoned witnesses. I mean, I reckon, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that mainly the persons who we ask to come before a committee are public servants, primarily before public servants. They're the ones who would summon to come before a committee outside of a joint select committee. Is that correct? And I don't know what is the normal time frame that is given. So now that we're having the budgetary period, and everybody knows it's a budgetary period with the Standing Finance Committee in the lower house. So they're prepared for that. But outside of that, are there any other instances, and what is the normal time that is provided, the usual time?
I'm reading this a little different in terms of the directives of the 7 days. Is it that it is the chairman shall supply the name, residence, and occupation of every such witness to the clerk of the parliament at least 7 days before his evidence is required? Right. It's not, is it for the person to be notified, or for the chairman to action at least 7 days?
All right. So the 7 days relates to the time when the person is required to attend. But how would the person have been notified?
No, I don't read it. That's why I say I don't read it like that.
That's not how you read it.
No.
No, that's not how I read it.
I am reading the 7 days to be applicable for the action between the chairman and the clerk.
Yes, that's how I read it, Chair, which is why I asked about the 7 days period.
Sorry, in your time,
Then
you go through this?
But then, but the 7 days, so read after the 7 days.
There should be another action now to relate to the individual who you want to summon.
Right, that you should be summoned at least.
And that, in my mind, would allow for a different kind of time period.
Right.
But this is not saying that.
No, that's not my reading of it.
Okay.
So basically, this is saying that the chairman shall supply the information to the clerk at least 7 days before the witness is required to come in, which I do agree would not be sufficient time, because the chairman would do this 7 days before, but how many days before shall the clerk consult with the witness, him or herself?
All right, inform the witness.
Yeah, so it
All right, so you have 2 actions taking place. The clerk is the person who has to summon the witness. Right, but the 7 days is, as I read it, is, no?
Yes, Chairman.
No?
Yeah, man. So the chairman The chairman decides
The witness.
based on the desire of the committee. The committee says we want one Charles Sinclair from a residence in Montego Bay to
Yes.
appear. The committee's desire. Then the committee's desire asks for an action to the chairman. The chairman then has to relay that to the clerk of the parliament at least 7 days before his evidence is required.
Okay, so there is a date when the evidence is required. Right?
Okay.
So it is, let us say today's what? Let us call it the 8th of March. So that date is known because that's the date of the next meeting.
Right. So
the
based on what?
So the 7 days
Yeah.
would be calculated from the date of the meeting.
Yes.
Oh, so now you have the
How
situation.
does the
where-
witness, when is the witness then informed? Within that 7-day period?
But that's the question we're asking. That's why we don't know.
Chairman, doesn't it go on to say that the clerk shall then, subject to the directions of the president, summon ever such witness on behalf of the Senate? So my understanding, if you read it fully down to the last line, is that the chairman, having carried out his duties and give within the 7 days, it is then now for the president to issue instructions or give directions as to the date by which the witness should appear. That is how I'm reading it, because it says, the clerk shall then, subject to the directions of the president, summon every such witness on behalf of the Senate. So there's a new action which would then be required after the 7 days, but there is no time frame which the standing orders proposes for that. It is therefore perhaps then that the date of the next sitting would become relevant. And the president would say the witness must come on such and such date. That is how I'm understanding it.
I see some need to reword. And I will also say this to Senator Scott Marley. So the committee desires to summon the witness. The chairman of the committee supplies the name to the clerk. Okay.
So we decided that the witness must appear before the committee on the 8th of March. So by the 28th of February, the chairman has to indicate to the clerk that he wants the witness to appear before the committee on the 8th of March. Having been informed of that, now we need to consult the president, who then gives certain directions. And what they're saying, what the purpose are saying is that that period of time could allow you to give 1 day notice.
Yeah.
They're saying that is not reasonable. So we're proposing that we work this.
Specific timeline.
Chairman, I can see. Right, Chair. So, did you hear that, Chair?
You know, I looked and I saw the green in it and I said, what a beautiful color.
Today is Jamaica Day, Chairman. You're allowed to get away with that because it's Jamaica Day. Now, Chairman, you've broken my train of thought. But essentially what we're saying, Chair, is that so the committee decides that they want Senator Morris to appear on the 8th of March. So by the 28th, based on the wording here, by the 28th of February, the chairman of the committee needs to inform the clerk that Senator Morris needs to appear as a witness. So that gives it 7 days. Once the clerk is made aware of that, the clerk then needs to consult with the president, who then will give certain directives. And what we are saying is that those directives or that consultation could lead to a situation where the witness only has 1 day notice or less than a day's notice. And it is within that context that we're proposing that we rework this section to add some specific timelines.
Ms. Brandon?
Chairman, I think as a proposal to the committee, this provision should be amended because based on my understanding, it's saying that such witness to the clerk of the parliament at least 7 days before is evidence, which to my mind would mean that 7 days before the meeting of the committee, when the witness is required to attend.
So you see?
So that's what I'm proposing. The committee should amend this provision because it's not quite clear.
You need clarity. That's what I'm saying. We're in the same place, looking at the same thing, and we have different interpretations of it. And that is what we need to do to get clarity to it. That's one. The issue of summons and the practice, but the issue of summons is as we understand the word has a particular, yes. And one has to look at the Senate and House of Representatives power and privileges legislation again, which speak to summons, right? Which is the formal procedure for getting a witness before the committee. The practice, as I'm informed, is that an invitation is done by a letter, as against the summons in the formal sense. So, if a person responds to the letter, then they don't normally use the summons. I suppose summons comes across as a drastic action, but we don't want to get into, I don't think we should venture into that too much about the invitation, letter, or so forth. We keep it strictly to the formal procedure.
So
Senator again.
No, I was saying, we are saying summoning of the witness, which appears in my mind to be a kind of instruct or demand. What the chairman is suggesting is maybe we have acted in the use of softer terms by a mere letter of invite. Now, what is it that we really want? Because if our standing orders suggest summon, then it creates a kind of expectation as opposed to an invite. And an invite can be rejected. I don't have to appear. And where does that put us? So if we're talking about summon, we're summoning the person. Because there's a real expectation that we require the person to be in attendance as a witness to give some sort of evidence.
And I agree with that. And that's why I said, I was just outlining what is used in practice, but we don't need to go down that road. Let us just keep it to the formal process, because that's what the principal act, the act speaks to that, which is the Senate and House of Representatives Power and Privileges Act. All right? So let us not, I don't think we should interfere with and try to slip in something about invite and so forth, etc., etc. Yeah. Mr. Cohen.
If I may just quickly, Chairman and members, certainly when I'm reading the provisions in 75 and I'm comparing the language used in 75.1 versus 75.2, 75.1 speaks to when it is intended to examine a witness, and certain stipulations are provided. You provide the name and the residence and place of employment, occupation of the witness, when you just desire to examine a witness. That, to my mind, perhaps would cover when we just want to invite somebody. However, when we look at subsection 2, as has been clearly stated, the language is summons, which means something different, and it's a more stronger language. And if you look at it also, the reference in 75.1 speaks to the clerk of the committee. It's a more formal procedure in 75.2, and it's involving the clerk to the entire parliament. So I think certainly in the framing of these provisions, it's a clear distinction in terms of what it is. So I just wanted to make that contribution.
And I think that is, I was pointing that out earlier when I said to Senator Fraser-Vins, if she picks up that there is a little difference between 1 and 2. 1 is speaking to a member. So the member may start out the process and say, well, I believe that we need to have a person come for as a witness. The submission is made to the clerk of the committee. The committee may now say, well, yes, we need this person to come. And it now escalates into 2. Yeah. All right. But I think we all agree that there is a need for rewording in relation to 75.2, Mr. Jimenez. You have more work to do. And see whether there is any time frame that we don't run contrary to any time frame, if any time frame is set out in the Act, Senate and House of Representatives Power and Privileges Act. And so we will pause at 75.2 to look at how the rewording, to make it absolutely clear as to what is expected and time frames involved. Members, I thank you very much for your attendance and your continued approach to ensuring that we effectively create a standing order that is easily understood and appreciated by all. Thank you very much. This Standing Orders Committee stands adjourned for a date.